Hello and welcome to the LD Aviation podcast. My name is Lindsay Dyer and I'm really glad you're here with us today. I'm especially excited about this episode because today I'm joined by JJ Madison, who many people also know simply as JJ. So JJ is an airline pilot. He's also a flight instructor. He's a longtime safety writer, and he's the author of Yikes, 100 Smart Pilots and Dumb Things They Did, Yet Lived to Tell About Them.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, it's a great book, JJ. I loved it. And what really stood out to me in this book was that, more like what it wasn't. And it's not about crashes and violations and crazy things that have well, maybe some crazy things, but not like fatal issues here. But it's about all those moments that were like, nothing officially went wrong, but things came uncomfortably close. A lot of the stories really take place during the quiet parts of the flight, and we're going to talk about that. You know, during the smooth air time, the autopilot's on, there's a low workload, exactly when you least expect the trouble to show up.
That's
I,
right.
right? I love that about it. I'll just say this up front too.
Hmm.
Yikes is one of those books that really makes you pause and reflect between chapters. Like each story is interesting. It's funny in places, it's uncomfortable in places, and it's really valuable, I think, for pilots and non-pilots. So we're going to talk a little bit about a few of the stories there, but it's absolutely the kind of book that's worth reading completely, cover to
Wow,
cover. So,
that's really high praise. I really appreciate that, Lindsay. Well, I try. The goal was to make it entertaining, but also educational,
mhm.
like sneaky educational, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
if it's a dry textbook type thing or a dry column situation, I know I lose people, and then I lose the point, right? I can't make you a safer pilot if I bore you.
No, that's totally true. And I will mention to the audience, I bought one for my dad as well because he is also a pilot and enjoys flying, and he's read it cover to cover as well and really enjoyed that. So,
All
and you
right.
endorsed it for me, so thank you very much. That was wonderful. He thought that was cool too.
Yeah, my pleasure. That's
Yeah.
very cool. I'm glad that he had that chance, and I'm glad to be talking to a second generation pilot.
Yes, that's right. Yep. I definitely spent many weekends at the FBO with him, and I'm sure that's where my love of. I mean, I don't do a lot of flying anymore, but at least aviation. I love aviation.
Yeah, it's the best.
It is. It really is. So we're going to talk about your book a little bit more later on, but we're also going to talk about some of the other work that you're doing, and that's through the Victor Kilo Fund, because really it seems like the same mindset that you have in the book about looking out for each other in the cockpit, it really carries over into the way you give back in a day-to-day basis, specifically in that Victor Kilo Fund. So anyway, welcome to the podcast, JJ. I'm excited for this conversation.
Thanks for having me on, Lindsay. I really appreciate that. And I'm the whole point of aviation is you can't do it alone, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't be safer alone. And so it's also a big community where everybody who is part of it recognizes that we're a small part of a much bigger thing, aviation and the planet, and that we're kind of special. Only, and what I mean by that is, if I've talked to 100 people, and I've had other friends talk to 100 people, maybe 10 will say, hey, it'd be cool. I'd like to learn how to fly. And maybe one out of those 10 people will actually take us up on it. So
Hmm.
1% of anybody who I've traditionally, historically spoken with, and my friends as well, who are also pilots, we've figured out only about 1% of us actually will become pilots. So in that regard, we're the one percenters. And so
Yeah, that's right.
we're a very small part and very exciting part of, and very close knit part ultimately, and a very diverse part of a much larger population. So because we're so small, it's really important for us to kind of stick together, learn from each other, and keep this thing going.
I love it. Yep, totally agree. So, real quick, JJ, before we go into the book, I wanted to take a step back a little bit and talk about you in general. Because you've had a long career in aviation, but you've also spent a lot of time thinking, writing, and teaching about aviation, specifically the safety part of it, which is a really different skill set than flying. So, let's start there. I know you've flown in different, multiple roles, airline pilot, flight instructor. How did your view of risk and decision making change as that experience grew?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really think it started to change the more experience I got, and it continues today. The more as I gain experience, I learn more and more about myself and also about how to fly. I've always been an advocate of the phrase, "It's okay to make mistakes once, and it's okay to make a mistake every day." The goal is to not make the same mistake every other day, right?
Very true.
So that's where I'm. I think in the beginning I was concerned about making mistakes, and once I realized, I'm not the Chuck Yeager type pilot, a natural born pilot. I'm somebody who has to work pretty hard at this, pay a lot of attention and practice. I
Hmm.
let the idea of making mistakes kind of go to the wayside and just focus on it's okay to make a mistake. And just the goal is not to make the same mistake more than once at a time.
No, very true. Yep, very true. Learning from those mistakes is the biggest thing, which is exactly what you're writing about. So I want to look back a little bit more on your writing career as well. So you've been writing for aviation safety for many, many years. I mean, how many years has it been? 20?
So, yeah, almost 20 years. I started writing for aviation, wow, back in 2013, 20. No, actually, wow. I started my very first aviation article was early 2000s. And even before that, I did a profile of Robin Petgrave of Bravo Helicopters and Wing back in 1995. But really, I got into aviation writing for two reasons. One, it was a way to stay connected to aviation after the great financial crisis. Kind of got rid of the company that I was flying Part 135 for a company that had way more clients who had way more money than time. And after 2008, 2009, they suddenly had way more time than money.
Yep.
So our jet base is closed. I was one of the about 30,000 out of 120,000 pilots, commercial pilots at that time who lost their jobs. So it was a way for me to stay connected to aviation while I attempted to get back into it.
Yep.
And but I'd always been enamored with aviation and aviation safety. My very first airline gig back in 2000, we had the ASAP program, which is the airline version of NASA reports. And so I got really involved in that because I was fascinated, again, the idea of making mistakes and learning from mistakes. So I've been kind of writing since 2000. Yeah. Wow.
Great.
About, on some level, about aviation safety. And the whole point was to pass it on. Let me just say real quickly. So have you ever hung out at an FBO and listened to other pilots or older pilots talk about their mistakes?
Well, wait, okay, is this a trick question? Yes, I want to say yes, because you do always find those old pilots hanging out at the FBO. Um,
Right.
but the ones that aren't there, I suppose, are the ones that made the big mistakes. Um,
That's right.
yeah.
And if you're not there doing that, you're out there on the porch like judging people's landings and stuff. Well, that whole right. So that whole
Yep.
concept of learning from other people in person is what I wanted to do with my writing was to virtually help people learn virtually hanger fly, so that we could all learn from other people's mistakes without having to make those same mistakes. Right.
Yeah.
That was the goal. That's the goal of my aviation safety writing.
So I'm guessing that along the way, this aviation safety writing really probably affected your own style of flying and the way you did some decision making. Is that right?
I feel fortunate that because I did so much research on NASA reports and then did the column. I mean, I researched probably tens of thousands of NASA reports that I think that it really influenced how I pay attention in the flight deck, or I'm able to call up stuff that I remember that I've researched and read and may applied that. So yes, I feel like I'm a more mature pilot. I hope I'm a safer pilot, and because I'm a little bit of a talker on the flight deck, outside of sterile cockpit, of course,
Right.
then I'm able to share the same stories that I've remembered, and then influence other people and get other people to share their stories, so that we can all learn from those incidents. So when we encounter those situations, we can go, oh yeah, that's what happened with this person. So let's try to avoid that. Or hey, that's what happened with this person, and they handled it super well. Let's duplicate that.
Let's learn from that. JJ, can you run us through real quick what is a NASA report in case somebody doesn't understand what that is?
Sure. So the NASA reports are part of the FAA's Aviation Safety Reporting System. So that's ASRS.gov. And the NASA reports basically are a way for you to report an incident that you've had if you didn't do it on purpose, if you didn't break an airplane or kill anybody, if it wasn't illegal, if you haven't been violated by it, the same incident in the last 5 years, and if you turn in your report within 10 days of being notified of it, or once you realize you may had a boo-boo, snafu, or yikes moment. And what happens is you can go to asrs.gov and you can fill it in online. You don't have to be a pilot. You can be ATC, you can be a flight attendant, you can be a mechanic, anybody is affiliated with aviation. If they see or witness or it happens to them, fill it out. That is then sent to, not to the FAA, but to NASA's Ames Research Lab out in California. And they strip out all of the identifying information. In other words, it gets anonymized. And then your incident is then listed in the ASRS.gov database. The other thing that I forgot to mention that is most important is at the end of your submission, you have to write your conclusion, what you learned from your experience, right?
Oh,
So that
yeah.
other people can read your analysis of the experience and determine if you learned something from it, or if they learned something from it, or if there's something else that they can learn from it in addition to your own takeaway.
That's great. I did not realize that last piece was in it. I've had a situation where I should have filled one of those out. This was many years ago, and I didn't do it. I would have learned more about it. I'm glad the program is there.
And you were a GA pilot at the time?
There was. Yep.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons I started writing for, I pitched the column to Ben Sklar and Janice Wood of General Aviation News because as a CFI, in between my airline gigs, I came to realize that pilots either didn't know about NASA reports or they refused to fill them out because they didn't trust the government.
Yes, I've
So
heard that too. Yep.
So my pitch was to start with my own snafu in the column and then link it to 3 or 5 NASA reports of the same topic and then analyze those. And I always started with my own snafu because I wanted to show people, hey, I make mistakes, and then sort of let their guards down because they can see, this guy admits that he makes mistakes. And so that helps other people admit, well, maybe I make a mistake. And then also to point out, look, it really is, it's healthy. It's worth it. If you don't violate any of the things that I just said about being illegal, killing somebody, breaking any metal, and reporting within 10 days, as well as not having been violated in the last 5 years, it's basically a get out of jail free card. And so it's been very helpful. I think people kind of, I like to think that some people have really benefited from the
Oh,
column.
I'm totally sure. I would have liked to have read that at this. I should have been out there looking at that.
Well, thankfully, there's a book for you. So the
That's
best of the
right.
columns are in the book.
That's right. There we go. So if you're looking at your combination of flying and you're instructing and all those years of writing, and you're writing about human factors, it really feels like Yikes sits at the kind of the intersection of all of those things together. So let's talk about the book specifically. What really finally made you say, "Oh right, I'm going to write this and I need to write it now."
So I wrote the column because I wanted to make general aviation. My goal was to make general aviation community pilots, AMT, et cetera, safer and a little bit humbler.
Okay.
And then in the process of writing that, about just around the time that COVID hit, just before COVID hit, I and I saw a television piece about Reverend Russell White. He's a pastor who was also a pilot and who started a flight school in the basement of his church because he wanted to keep, in his words, kids in his community out of prison, hospital, and the cemetery.
Okay. Yep.
And the story goes that by day he was a truant officer. So that's the person who picks you up if you're skipping school.
Sure. Okay.
So he worked as a truant officer and encountered 5 young men skipping school. And he said, I'll give you a choice. You can go back to the school with me and the principal will suspend you, or with your parents' permission, I'll take you flying over East Orange, New Jersey, where they lived and where their high school was this weekend, and we can get a chance to look at that. And at first they were doubtful. They were like, you can't fly, man. You're a black guy. And he said, well, actually, I can fly. I'm in the Air National Guard. And let's go take a look with your parents' permission. So they did, and so they did. And he realized in the flight that he's sort of blowing their minds. And he also realized he couldn't just do that once. He had to kind of get his own act together. Okay. And so decided to start a flight school in the basement of his church. And it's been around for, at the time, it had been around for, I don't know, 35, 40 years, 45 years or so. Oh. And I was blown away by that and thought, what can I do to help?
Sure.
And after about a week, because sometimes I'm a little slow to the helm, I realized I could, if I took the best of my columns and I put them in a book and I sold the book, then maybe I could start a foundation. And if I sold any of the book, I could turn that into maybe some scholarship money for Eagle Flight Squadron. And if I sold more than a few books, then maybe I could sort of broaden that and then turn it into scholarships for any under-resourced Civil Air Patrol Squadron, flight school, STEM program, or aviation department, whether rural, urban, or suburban. So that's the genesis of it, that Reverend Russell White story.
That is so cool. And that's exactly what you're doing now. The proceeds of the book do help your foundation, which I was going to talk about a little bit later on as well. So we'll leave some of that for later. But you're not only helping other pilots learn, you are helping fund new pilots.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. And also because, the reality is the aviation aerospace industry is sort of teetering on the edge of collapse. We need 38,000 more pilots, commercial airline pilots before the end of the decade. We need like 15,000 A&Ps annually because like 5,000 or 7,000 are retiring every year. We need at least 15,000 more ATC personnel, and particularly since the last shutdown, so many have decided to call it a career that we're super short. We're really short on the ATC personnel, and we need more meteorologists and we need more engineers. So our fund is not just for that; it's also to fund AMTs potentially, as well as people interested in ATC school or want to become meteorologists or want to become AMPs. So yeah, well, our goal is to help in some small way. Yeah. The aerospace aviation community and industry continue to grow in the United States.
Oh, that's so great. So wonderful. Okay, I'm gonna pull us back to the book here a little bit, and I want to know, did any of those stories like surprise you? I love it. There it is. Great name.
Honestly, every single story in the book surprised me on some level.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
From the guy who woke up over the Gulf after falling asleep in his Cessna 310 to the flight instructor, who's senior flight instructor who got so caught up with his one of his clients' friends in buying and purchasing and trying to be the outbid other people interested in a Cessna 150 that they almost lost their lives flying IFR in another Cessna 150 that itself was VFR only. And so his response surprised me. His takeaway was great, and that was surprised me. I mean, there's so many things in here that really that were so surprising that I thought I gotta share this with people because if I'm surprised by it, they're gonna be surprised by it.
No, totally. Well, I have a million questions for you, but I think later on I'm going to talk a little bit more about the low workload. Let me go back to the book. I keep getting distracted here.
That's fine.
Why use the NASA reports as the backbone for the book?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because people don't analyze them.
Okay.
I wanted to do an aviation safety column for a long time, and I discovered that a lot of people analyze NTSB reports.
Sure.
But nobody was analyzing NASA reports. And NASA reports are fascinating. First of all, because the person who survived the incident lived to tell about it and then actually told us about it.
Yeah.
And in addition to telling us about it, they're telling us what their thoughts were in the moment. So that's fascinating reading on its own self. that's the number one reason is that
Okay.
they're alive to talk about it, and then they had something to say about it, and they either learned from it or they didn't.
Sure.
So I just felt like this is too good not to share.
Ton of data in there. You're right. I don't see anybody really talking about that data. We do hear about the NTSB stuff, when there's a crash, everybody's looking into that. You're right. I don't see people talking about the NASA reports. That's cool. That's fascinating. So we just kind of little talked about this before, but one of those early stories that you have, it's early in the book. It really stuck with me, and it was kind of like what you were talking about. The one that fell asleep in cruise, and he wasn't doing anything high stress. It was really smooth air. The autopilot was on, and the one that where he only woke up because there was a radio call that came. That felt like a very quiet but powerful example of human factors and how they can kind of encroach into our daily life workload. So, was it important for you to show how often these moments happen when things feel easy, not hard?
Yeah, I think this is such a great question, Lindsay, and I'm really glad you asked it because some of the most egregious errors that humans make is when we're all, to quote the phrase, there I was sitting there fat, dumb, and happy,
Yeah.
right? Everything's going smoothly. There's nothing else that, we're just out chilling, and suddenly all hell breaks loose. And I think it's precisely because of that. We get, as human beings, we get complacent, whether in the moment or over time, or, over somebody's career,
Mm-hmm.
or just in that moment during that flight. Well, just that in the particular instance you said, the guy had perhaps taken, we don't know officially, but you can kind of speculate. He sort of took advantage of the fact that he'd done this kind of trip before. He was a
Yeah.
pretty experienced pilot. So he didn't really pay attention to his own physiological needs. So he definitely got there fatigued. He got up. He didn't have a good night's sleep prior. He got up there super early. He had to drive to his airplane. Then he had to fly it several hundred miles in the dark, and the thrum of the propeller certainly makes it kind of like a lullaby type situation. And he was on autopilot, and the GPS was working, and so he just thought, I'll just take a couple of winks,
Yeah.
rather than thinking, maybe this is not a day for me to go because I'm really fatigued. Instead, he
Mm-hmm.
thought, well, everything, the technology is going to save me. So that's what he did. He took a couple of winks. Technology sort of saved him, but not really, because he woke up well past his destination over the Gulf,
Yep.
and running out of fuel.
That's crazy. Yep. Okay, you touched on this part too, and it's kind of the theme of routine. And that shows up throughout your book. Well, I should say it shows up a lot in those fuel stories that you have in there as well. Like there was one where that pilot wasn't reckless at all. It was just, again, kind of like what you were saying right now. It was this one was a short hop, so not long like that, where he fell asleep. But it was such a short hop, and he just figured he could do this like every other time he does it. So he didn't do his full cross check.
Yeah.
What do you think about familiarity, and is it actually perhaps one of the more dangerous situations we can put ourselves in?
Absolutely. There's a saying at the airlines. You want to be aware of the 1 hour pilot and the 1,000 hour pilot. The 1 hour pilot, because then they're behind the airplane. You're not sure they know what they're doing. The
Yeah.
1,000 hour pilot is because they're totally sure of what they've been doing because they got 1,000 hours in the seat,
Yep.
and they've seen it all, right?
Yep.
So they've been through that routine. At my airline, we have checklists, and the checklist philosophy is you don't memorize the checklist.
Mm-hmm.
But I've only flown with one captain in the last 2.5 years who has not memorized the checklist.
Really?
And memorizing the checklist is a way to get in trouble
Yeah.
because it's routine, right? Checklists are fantastic. That routine is important because it makes sure that you do everything standard at every flight regime, the same way in a standard fashion. But memorizing the checklist allows you to kind of forget about, because you think you've got the routine down, but in a non-normal situation, the checklist is what brings you back to standardization. And so, yeah, routine is. The other thing I'll say is, as an example of routine getting in trouble, is on approaches, briefing approaches, or flying an approach. Right? If you go to the same airport the whole time, I've encountered many people, many pilots, and many NASAs where being in the same geographical area over and over again makes them complacent, and so near misses have occurred, or they've actually, because they're so complacent, that their complacency ended up having them at the wrong airport.
Oh, crazy. Yep.
Right, right. The nearby airport, not the airport.
Yep.
So yeah, it's important to have a routine on the flight deck because it breeds standardization and it helps you deal with the non-normals. But routine can get a person in trouble. There's that phrase, familiarity breeds contempt.
Yes.
Well, familiarity can breed too close contact to the ground or to other airplanes.
Yes. Yep. And I'm sure for those who aren't pilots, this is something that you can also look in your regular day-to-day life. I don't know, mine's kind of a silly example, but I have a couple of fish tanks and a rabbit that gets fed every morning, right? And I go through and I do it, and it's a routine that I do every time. And then sometimes I'm at the office and I'm thinking, did I feed everybody? Because I cannot even remember if I did that process because it's so routine. And now it's not going to kill them if they don't eat breakfast once in a while, but definitely different when you're flying an airplane.
I like that example a lot because I mean I've had that happen to me, right? Like brushing and flossing my teeth. I'm supposed to do it every night, and I remember I do it every night, but then after like an 18-hour day sitting forever, and then ended up flying for 7 hours out of 8, I get up the next morning and go, did I actually do that?
Yeah.
Did I actually do that? So it's I don't know how to. That's like the double-edged sword of routine. Is that it's a question of I haven't figured that out yet. Is how it's totally applicable to these stories are totally applicable to outside of aviation because they're the same kind of physiological, psychological, human factors, things that happen to people who don't fly as well as to people who do fly. But in terms of routine, it's a great thing to have, but it's a double-edged sword. I haven't figured out quite yet how to, without a checklist present,
Right.
to make it to make it kind of foolproof, or in my case, because sometimes I'm an idiot-proof in the day-to-day routines.
Well, once you figure it out, let me know because I haven't either. I'm sure those fish have gone without breakfast once in a while, and I can't remember them. So yeah,
Builds character.
yeah, that's right. That's right. It does. I will say I've had those things. They're like 8 years. They've been around for 8 years. They're like old
Wow.
fish, so I guess it's not hurting them too much. So
Yeah, you're doing all right.
I guess so. Okay, we're talking about human factors. What human factor do you personally watch for? Is there one that's specific that you really pay attention to?
Yeah, I'm gonna say fatigue.
Okay. Yep.
And I say that because our society, the way we live, is just breeds or just like just really encourages fatigue,
Yeah.
right? Sleep is underrated or it's overrated. Actually, sleep is overrated in our society. It's now becoming more aware of how important it is. But when I first started flying, for instance, we didn't have the same fatigue rules that we do now,
Right.
and you were kind of laughed at or kind of teased a little bit if you said you were tired and you need to go home as a CFI, that kind of thing. The goal was always to tough it out, right? Sleep when I'm dead, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the reality is, so there's that, and then there's also the reality that flying is a lot of hard work, and because it's a lot of hard work, and the brain just being conscious, I read somewhere that just being conscious takes up 60% of the energy reserves of a normal human. So just being awake, 60% of all your energy is just going to your brain, helping you stay awake.
Okay.
And so then you add on top of that all the stuff that goes into flying, whether you're instructing, whether you're learning, or whether you're an airline pilot in day-to-day operations. The amount of energy that you need to put into the body goes way up, but the ability to actually access that energy through healthy food goes way down because there are very few salad bars or sushi bars or fresh food or fast food stands anywhere near an FBO if you're a flight instructor, and you're not making a lot of money, so you gotta feed yourself somehow, usually with highly processed cheap food, which is an energy drain. And if the airlines, unless you're bringing your own food with you, you have limited food options. They're restaurants, which are which have their own issues. Bless their hearts, they're doing the best they can, but the reality is it's not the best food for you. So that's an energy drain. And then if you're flying in during the summer, and if you're an airline pilot, period, the flight deck is extremely dry, right? And pressurization is a factor that makes it extremely dry generally. So you're constantly dehydrating yourself, not on purpose. So trying to stay in front of that. And dehydration is a fatigue is the number one symptom of dehydration. So
Okay.
yeah, so fatigue is the big thing, and then just working long hours and having to sit. What is it? Hours of boredom interspersed with moments of sheer terror. It's not quite sheer terror, but the reality is there are a lot of moments where you got to kind of keep yourself in place or just in the present moment, so that you can then do your job as an airline pilot. And that takes a lot of energy, and that produces a lot of fatigue. So fatigue is the big thing because
Okay.
it's insidious. It doesn't show up obviously, but it does degrade performance precipitously.
Yep. Yep. There's a bunch of great stories which I couldn't cite right now, but I know they've talked about a lot of different fatigue studies out there, and a certain number of hours of sleep deprivation equals, having certain number of drinks, and
That's right.
like it's that, yeah, it's that important. How would you have a tip for pilots to build better self assessments or self awareness?
Well, I love that. That's another great question. I do love that the FAA has really gotten involved in a meaningful way with this, with the I'm safe and the PAVE concepts. I think for pilots, my biggest takeaway is I treat flying as a professional sport.
Okay.
Because if you look at what athletes do, professional athletes do, they travel somewhere, right? They go to a hotel, they rest, they work out, and then they go play their game. As an airline pilot, what do? I show up at the airport ready to perform for the public, right? And public safety and carrying people there. Then I end up at a hotel where I rest, and then I exercise, and then the next day I go out and I do it again. So there are very big parallels between
Sure.
the two. And so I think I don't know anything about professional athletes personally. I knew one once, way a long time ago. I was a mentor for one of a guy who ended up at the Green Bay Packers. So that was kind of cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Right. But I haven't really talked about his regime so much with him in many, many years. But my sense of what professional athletes do is that they put the best stuff in their body that they can. They work out to the maximum amount that they can. They get rest as to the best amount as they can, so they can perform to their best every time they go out and perform. So I like if my take the best thing I can offer pilots, whether you're a CFI, aspiring pilot, or an airline pilot, or a corporate pilot, a professional pilot, treat it you're like it's a sport. Treat it like you're an athlete. So treat your body the same way so that stay hydrated, eat the best you can, and stay on top of your game, study your books, and that way you can perform and overcome stuff like fatigue in those moments when you can't control your environment or your food.
Yep. Oh, great point. And probably all of us should, anybody, even not airline pilots. I mean, airline pilots have just that high level of safety that's attached to the job, but all of us could learn that. I'm sure I can drink some more water and eat less, French fries. So,
I can't speak to your French fries, but I'll bet you could probably have some more water.
right.
And I'm not. I've got to be honest. My wife is the person who really hipped me to this. She's got
Oh,
this
good.
phrase up: to treat life like a sport, train like an athlete. That's up. That's up in a couple places in our house, and she brought that into our family. And I thought, this is really good stuff. I'm really fortunate I'm married to this woman
That is
because
so
she is
cool.
wise.
That is so good. What a great
Yeah.
partnership working together. Um,
Thank you.
So something else I noticed is that a lot of those weather stories really weren't, dramatic failures, kind of like we talked about before. They were just slow realizations. Conditions were legal. They were maybe trending the wrong way, and the turning back early felt uncomfortable, felt premature. So how much of that do you think is that forecast optimism versus the internal pressure to keep going?
Yeah, I think it's about equal.
Okay.
Right. So, uh, I always, as an instructor, always remind people you can abort at any point in the flight, and that even begins while you're creating your flight plan. But at any moment on this flight, you can divert or abort. Um, and that gives people, because a lot of people don't think like that, right? We're very mission oriented as pilots. Our goal is we're very mission oriented. That's what our job is. Even if when we're learning, even if we're just flying for fun for ourselves,
Hmm.
we're the type of people who want to get the thing done, right? Because that's part of the joy of it is the operational tasks that are involved in this. And so by reminding my students and reminding my flight deck colleagues, hey, we can abort at any time, we can divert at any time.
Hmm.
It like breaks something in that chain of get-there-itis that reminds them, oh right, this is not rocket science or brain surgery where once you start the brain surgery, you got to finish it.
Sure.
You,
Right.
you
Yep.
can't take a break in the middle, right?
Hmm.
But on a flight, if conditions change, you can divert. And so that's the hardest part, honestly, to get in people's minds, even for me. But it's also the most rewarding thing to remind people at any point in the flight, from the beginning while you're still sitting there creating the flight plan,
Hmm.
all the way to when you're pulling up to the gate. If you need to, if the gate doesn't look good, if the tie down spot doesn't look good, you can still divert to another tie down spot, right? You can still divert to another gate if you need to. So that's the biggest thing.
Okay. So don't forget that. Don't forget you can always turn around or abort or change.
And so that's the thing that and honestly I learned that from the NASA reports. I didn't really just come into that.
Okay.
It was reading the NASA reports, doing the research for the column in the book that I realized that I came to that realization over and over again. These things could have been avoided, and also the takeaways that some of these NASA reports included in their conclusions were, you know what, I could have diverted, or I could have decided not to go. Brian Schiff likes to talk about how it's better to be in the restaurant, sharing stories about how many times you've been in the restaurant and not gone somewhere, than in the air wishing you were in the restaurant,
Totally.
right? Yeah.
No,
So
that's a really good point. Yep.
yeah.
Hmm.
So that's the thing that's one a big takeaway that I learned from reading the NASA reports, that yeah, regret because you pressed on is much greater than perhaps remorse for while hanging out at the restaurant and enjoying a good meal.
Yeah. No, very, very true. What mistakes do you worry most about these days? Either about maybe not your own, but what mistakes do you worry about in these upcoming pilots coming on board, learning and
I read an interesting article recently where pilots who learn on six packs, the traditional six pack,
okay, yeah.
actually
Hmm.
learn faster how to read instruments and how to handle the airplane than those who learn on glass
Okay.
or the
Yeah.
technically advanced flight decks. And I thought, that's really amazing. So that's the thing that I think is the biggest thing that I think about in young pilots is that not having the ability to develop a good scan
Hmm.
because of everything's in one place on a glass cockpit versus on a six pack,
Yep.
and also automation dependency for both, whether you're a young pilot or a seasoned pilot. I'll call myself a seasoned pilot. I got in last week on a trip. I got caught up in automation, right, dependency, and it didn't quite bite me in the butt,
Okay.
but but I did realize that, oh, that I was too busy following that magenta line and not really paying attention to the FMS and also my nav map and confirming stuff.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'll tell you a story real quick. So
Yeah.
we were coming out of Jacksonville,
Okay.
and we were given a heading, and then we were given a turn to go direct to a point.
Okay.
And I didn't have the point on my FMS. I had my range too small,
Ah,
so it
yes.
should have been out like this. So I couldn't see the point, right? So basically what you do is you bring we bring the point up to direct to, you go direct to the point,
Yeah.
and then we confirm and we execute it. And so the white line took us one way, but the FMS, because it was such a funky angle, the FMS and the automation, because we were on autopilot at a point, started a very slow turn that didn't actually align with the turn direct to. So we were like 20 degrees off, and the ATC said, Crosby, that point is like a 020 heading, say your intentions. And it was at the same time that the ATC was coming on and telling us that
Uh-huh.
we realized, oh, we need to turn sharper, more
Yeah.
sharply, right?
Hmm.
So we had to reconfigure the FMS again and reprogram it real quick, do another direct to, and then get the airplane to actually make that sharp turn.
Yeah.
So we said, hey, we're turning to Crosby right now. But that was a case of, I just knew the airplane was going to take care of me, but because I wasn't ranged out far enough, I couldn't see that Crosby. I really needed to be turning the airplane more like this. I should have pushed it that way in heading mode, and then gone into FMS mode to let the airplane finish the rest. And so that was, I mean, I've got over 6,000 hours and over almost 1,100 hours in the seat in that airplane. Aha, 1,000-hour pilot. Watch out.
That's a great
Uh,
point. That, I mean,
so,
real
yeah.
world and recent.
Yeah, and so my captain and I, what do? We ASAP'd it and then we NASA'd it right away,
Okay.
like, right?
Great.
Just because we're like, hey, we didn't mean to do it. It wasn't illegal. We didn't get a deviation or anything.
Hmm.
ATC just sort of made a gentle reminder, hey, what are you doing?
Hmm.
And we realized because we both didn't have our viewfinder far enough out, our rangefinder.
Yep.
So we both realized, oh yeah, we just kind of let FMS take care. We got a little complacent.
Yep.
So now hopefully other people will learn from this because I shared it with you on the flight deck on your podcast, but also I shared it in my NASA report.
The NASA report. No, I love it. That's so cool. Okay, so across all these stories and the story that you just told me right now, what really comes through to me is that all the people that you wrote about, they're smart, capable people, and they're just having human moments that we all have them. And it really feels closely tied, the human aspect feels very closely tied to the work that you're doing at the Victor Kilo Fund. What did your experience in aviation, or I'm sorry, how did your experience in aviation really shape the way that you think about service and support outside the cockpit?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So I've wanted to fly since I was a kid, since third grade when Captain Dan landed his Bell 47 helicopter in our playground and we at Murch Elementary School got to walk around it, and he told us all about it. But I didn't become a pilot until middle age. I joke that as a Hollywood writer, I was burned out, and my midlife crisis was not buying a red Corvette; it was getting a private pilot license.
Okay, that's very
But
cool.
but I didn't think I'd go any further than that. But I love flying ever since I was a kid, and then I met the three Tuskegee Airmen,
Yeah,
and at the
okay.
time they were in their late 80s, and two of them were still flying on
Wow.
their own airplanes. So I just was, first of all, awe-inspired and so grateful to meet these three Tuskegee Airmen. And they were so open and generous that I decided to share my sort of frustration about never really knowing how to fly, not knowing anybody, having any kind of influences or role models who could, get me to where I wanted to go. And I just want to learn how to fly. And they said, come on, Cable, we'll take you under our wing. Through their mentorship and guidance, I was able to go. I already had a degree, but I went back and got a second degree, this one in professional, pro pilot, professional aviation
Okay.
at Long Beach City College. Through their guidance and mentorship, I was able to get through. And, they, at the time that I was going through, you needed a lot of multi-engine hours in order to qualify for the airlines.
Okay.
So, it occurred to them hey, the FARs don't say that you have to get single pilot, commercial CFI, and then get your the
Multi.
multi-transition.
Yep.
Why not get your multi-transition right after you get your private pilot, and then do all of the other stuff in the multi, and that way you'll help. So that
Yep.
helped me a lot because I was able to build a couple hundred, almost 300 hours. They also helped me about figuring out how to, partner with people to kind of dry lease a twin Comanche so that
Cool.
we all could benefit from this.
Cool.
information. So I got all of my training, and that time, like I said, you needed 300 or 500 hours to qualify for the airlines. So that helped me get there while still learning how to train and not having to actually pay for the extra time just to, to punch holes in the sky.
Yep.
And then sort of their leadership and mentorship helped me get to become, more kind of mature and composed as a pilot, and seeing myself as a commercial pilot and potentially being a professional pilot. So their mentorship and guidance is what really influenced me to, once I got to where I am as an airline pilot, want to pay that back, pay that forward, as we say now, because I'm very grateful that I'm filled with gratitude. And so that gratitude just comes out as, hey, let me help other people because I got helped, and maybe I can help somebody achieve their dream, because these people helped me achieve a dream I didn't even realize I had till I started going down this path.
Wow, wonderful story. And that really highlights that peer support that we need. I mean, it's cool to have maybe role models and stuff that we don't know, but that really peer-to-peer support, that that person, you're talking to them, it's so important. Um,
Yeah, I agree with that because, for instance, part of it was like I just didn't see anybody, black who was flying. So if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I used to think, nah, that's not really true, but it's kind of true. If you can't see it, it's really hard to be it, unless you're a particularly kind of strong-willed person. Also, I was older, so being able to see other pilots and then encounter other older pilots because I was intimidated by younger pilots because I just didn't know if I was going to be able to pick it up at the same rate. So then
yeah.
I had my moments of doubt, and so having pilots who helped me, kind of assuage those fears. I had one CFI. Honestly, my first rating was a helicopter, and that's a whole other story. But Robin Peckgrave, who was my CFI, one day I was having a really hard time learning to hover. And he just looked at me at the end of that particular lesson. He says, "Don't worry, man, you'll get it tomorrow." And I went home going, "How does he know I'm going to get it tomorrow? What is he talking about? I don't think
Right.
I'll ever get it." And I went to sleep, and I woke up the next day, came to my lesson, and the very next day I learned how to hover. My hover was great, and I've been hovering ever since. And my point was, this guy believed in me
Yeah.
before I believed in me.
Yeah.
And because of that, I advanced and progressed. And so I take that away all the time. I'm getting chill bumps right now thinking about
No,
it. I
inspiring.
do that all the time whenever I'm with another pilot, whether it's a student pilot or one of my cadet pilots whom I mentor at my airline or through AOPA. I just do whatever I can to remind them, you know what? Yeah, it's hard, but you know what? You're probably going to get that pretty quickly because you're capable and you're smart.
Mm-hmm. So what if, especially after hearing that story, how can us as listeners help? What can we do to help the Victor Kilo Fund?
Well, I appreciate that. So, first of all, buy the book.
Okay, all right, great.
Go to yikesthebook.com.
I'll put all the links down there in the bottom of the details so we can find it. Okay, so
Okay.
buy the book because that gives
Yeah.
feeds back to
Right.
the fund.
And the name of our foundation is Victor Kilo Fund, and we call it Victor Kilo because that's Greek for 1,000 victories. And the reality is, if you're going to achieve a big goal, it usually takes 1,000 little victories to get there, right? And so that's one of the things that we recognize, and our goal is to. The other reason for Victor Kilo is 1,000 victories. If maybe we can get 1,000 people scholarships, whether flight training or AMT or meteorological school or anything related to aerospace and aviation, then we've done our small part to help the aviation and aerospace industry. So Victor Kilo Fund is the name of it. It's a nonprofit aerospace education fund, and all of the proceeds from the book. I'm fortunate. I make a pretty good living as an airline pilot, so I don't take any money from this. All the proceeds from the book go directly into the fund.
Okay.
And we started selling it last June 2025. We gave out our first $5,000 flight scholarship.
Wow.
And that was to Eagle Flight Squadron, that squadron that was started by Reverend Russell White. And
Uh-huh.
because they own their own airplanes, they were able to give one cadet that $5,000, and he has soloed and will complete all of his training from within that $5,000.
Great. Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
But wait, there's more.
Okay, I want to hear
So,
it. Yeah.
so this past Martin Luther King Jr. birthday,
Uh-huh.
January
Yep.
2026, we just announced that we're awarding a $10,000 scholarship that is going to go to a young woman, Kamora Freeland, who will then be able to, she's a private pilot now and
Okay.
a sophomore at Spelman College in Atlanta, and she'll be able to get her instrument rating and perhaps a little bit more with this $10,000 scholarship.
That is so cool. Or I was going to say, you must be so proud. Like you can see the results, they're happening.
Yeah, it's really exciting, right? I didn't realize how much fun it was going to be or how much it would touch me. But the most important thing is it's not because of me. It's because of all the people who bought a book, who bought an Audible, who bought a Kindle version, right?
Sure.
It's this whole aviation community's come together and said, "Hey, this is a pretty good idea. I like the book. I like what it sounds, or I like the idea." And out of all these thousands of people who have done this, we've been
Mm-hmm.
able to provide $15,000 in scholarship money. Not just me, it's the whole community. That's the most important and most like mind-blowing thing for me. It's so cool.
I agree. I will point out, I know you don't like to toot your own horn, but it started with you. I mean, had you not created the book, we wouldn't have been able to purchase it. So, kudos to
Okay.
you for, starting it and it just takes one person to start something, then the rest of us can jump on board and obviously create lots of opportunities. I can't wait to see what else you guys do. That's going to be great.
Thanks, Lindsay. I really appreciate that. You're right. I just wanted to do one small thing, and if everybody does one small thing together, we can turn it into Victor Kilo, 1,000 victories.
I love it. Okay, I'm going to kind of go a little bit back into the book again. So after reading all the 100 different stories, um, what really stayed with me is that none of these pilots thought that they were about to make a mistake at the time that they made the mistake, right? So if there's one mindset shift that you hope readers and listeners walk away with, what would that be?
Flying an airplane like you're flying an airplane, not like you're driving a car.
Okay. Yeah.
I borrow that again from Brian Schiff. It's a great phrase, right? Because once we once we become pilots and we're pretty good at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We kind of not always present, and that's just reality. We're bombarded with so much stuff in life that
Mm-hmm.
we've managed to figure out how to do stuff with only part of our brain
Yeah.
operating, focusing on it. But flying an airplane, flying a helicopter, flying a glider, flying a kite, hang gliding, all of those things really are wonderful things that'll kill you fast.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to be present.
Yeah.
Be present.
Mm-hmm.
Be in the moment. Because by
Mm-hmm.
being present, then you can have the next thought, which is, what do I got to do next? What's next for me? What do I got to do?
Mm-hmm.
And so by being present and yet asking the question, what's next or what's next, we're present yet ahead of the aircraft. And that's the thing that I found that with most pilots in the NASA reports that I then put into the book, Yikes,
Mm-hmm.
that's what caused their yikes moments, that they weren't situationally aware, present in the moment, thinking
Yeah.
about what's next. And not just staying ahead of the aircraft, it's also like staying ahead of the environment,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure.
There's that one story about the CFII who he had to wait. He had a partial panel failure. He had a radio failure. He had a partial panel failure, and then it wasn't until his door opened on his Aero, right, the cargo door opened, that he realized maybe I should get down, maybe I should land, right?
Uh-huh.
Because he wasn't thinking about it's night, it's IMC, I've got 8 hours of flying under my belt, I'm tired, what else is happening out in the environment,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's the same thing with that CFII who was flying the guy in the 152 to go try and get another airplane, right?
Right.
This airplane isn't for us, but I'm super confident in what I can do because I've flown a million hours, but not thinking about, well, what's happening out in the environment that could get us in trouble. So
Yep.
long-winded answer, short to this to say, stay in the moment, be present, so that you can be situationally aware, to learn, to think about what's next and what's next.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So, how about, are there any more stories coming? I mean,
I
this
will
is,
say every time I speak to a pilot who buys the copy, they go, I
yeah,
got a story for you.
I bet.
so,
Yep.
so
Yep.
we're threatening to do Yikes 2.0
I
or
love it.
Yikes again
Okay.
or another Yikes. So, yeah, we're hoping to do more.
I bet you do have. I mean, I bet everybody can say, "Oh, I had this experience." I mean, I'm not even. I mean, I only have 100 and some hours, and I know I've got two that I could talk about there. So, so cool. I'm excited. All right, keep me posted on Yikes 2.0. So,
I will. I look forward to that. Yeah, yeah. So if it comes to that, I'm definitely going to touch base with you and find out what your Yikes story is so we can get that in.
okay, sounds good. We can add it in there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sounds good. I'm adding my dad in there too. It was the two of us flying together. So,
Nice.
both of us, we both made mistakes. So, anyway, so excited for that. JJ, I really appreciate how openly you talk about all this stuff. I mean, that's spectacular. Like you said about the column, if you share when the mistakes that you've made, then other people will feel comfortable doing it. So it's really not easy to admit those close calls. It's hard to talk honestly about those moments that almost went sideways, but incredibly valuable. I really do feel like it opens up the pathway for other people to share what they have done and probably be interested in learning more so that they can make sure they don't do it again or don't do somebody else's mistake. So,
And one step beyond that, um, showing people who haven't yet gotten into flying that
mhm,
it's you don't have to be perfect to do it. You just
sure.
have to be willing to learn and practice. That's the other idea because I remember thinking, because I'm older, I'm going to make mistakes, and all these young bucks are, just doing it and advancing, 40 hours. It took me 70 hours to get a helicopter private pilot, and the average is 55. Even though the FARs are only 40 hours, and
Hmm.
I was embarrassed, but somebody pointed out, because I wrote that in the column, somebody pointed out in the comment section, hey, that's 70 hours. That's like, those are extra hours of training and learning that you got. So, embrace that. And that made me feel better because, again, sharing these snafus and mistakes allows people to see, hey, you don't have to be perfect to be a pilot. You just have to be willing to learn from your mistakes, from the mistakes of others, and to be willing to practice.
Yep. That practice. Yep. I love it. Practice makes perfect, or maybe not perfect, but at least it makes it better.
That's right. Practice makes us better.
Makes us
That's
better.
right.
That's awesome. JJ, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed this conversation, honestly, and really for anybody who's listening, if today's episode resonated with you, I can't recommend Yikes 100 Smart Pilots and Dumb Things They Did Yet Lived to Tell About Them enough. That's a long title, but it's really good description of what the book is all about. Again, it will be linked further down. We really only touched on a few of the stories during our conversation today, but the real value is when you're sitting with that book yourself and you're reflecting on how easily these situations really could happen to any of us. So I think that's very important. So also, if you're able to, I really encourage our listeners to learn more about and support that Victor Kilo Fund that you put together. I mean, what an inspiring organization and a way that we can all help in our own little way. So it really is an organization. I mean, you're doing meaningful work for aviation. We really do need more pilots. We need more aviation people in general. I mean, aviation's not going away. It's just going to get bigger. It's going to get bigger and better. So love that. Anyway, you can find JJ and his work online. So check the show notes on the bottom for the links. I'll have the Victor Kilo Fund in there and his professional pages if you want to reach out and say hi to him. As always, you can also find the LD Aviation podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like it, follow it, share it, and that really helps us reach more people who care about flying smarter and supporting one another.
Lindsay, thank you so much for letting me be on the show. I mean, it's just been a blast. I really appreciate it. You're doing great work for aviation, and I just really hope that it continues. Continue to have success after success, and that your podcast audience continues to grow.
It's wonderful. Yeah, I love conversations like this. Likewise, JJ, and thank you so much for your time. And then I can't wait to hear about the next one. We'll have you on again.
Oh well, thank you very much. I look forward to that. All right.
Wonderful.